And how to avoid it? First, we need to define what role-playing is. This is role-playing. As kids coming together to pretend they are wizards, fighters, and so on in their mom's basement. This is also role-playing. That guy isn't really hurt. Everybody is just pretending he is, and they are trying to fix his leg, which isn't broken in really world. Now, all of these qualify as role-playing. But for needs of this presentation, we will narrow this down to role-playing in a classroom. All of them, we have mentioned, can be used in classroom. That doesn't mean they should be used in the classroom. First, role-playing for us is first a teaching method. That means that the goal of a role-playing is to teach someone something. Not to have fun, not to introduce a new experience, but to pursue some educational goal. Second, role-playing is assigning more or less complex roles to students in order to create some sort of dialogue, some sort of game, some sort of atmosphere maybe also. Third, for us, role-playing has no or only very weak competitive elements. You can't win educational role-playing, which is kind of important because we will get to there. And also, there is a very clear distinction, so-called magical circle, between role-playing and class. In one moment, we are teacher and a student. In second moment, students are role-playing something. And these roles of teacher and a student, which are also social roles, doesn't apply anymore. What is great about role-playing in language education? First, improvisation. Your students need to improvise, to adapt, and to overcome some situation, which is kind of cool. Secondary, vocabulary. Your student needs to draw from all his skill, from all his memory, to use the words he needs, because suddenly he's in a new situation. Third, motivation. This one is very important. Normally, when you give student an assignment, his motivation is to complete the assignment. While role-playing, the motivation can be kind of more interesting. For example, you need to sell your company. You need to get to the airport. You need to get some information from this guy, or something like that. And that motivation can create much better learning situation for specific students. Four, complexity. Role-playing brings all the needed skills together, and you can use anything from writing, from basic grammar, to, of course, talking. And five, and the most problematic and the most cool, in my opinion, is liminality. We will get into liminality just now. What is it? In anthropologics, we have basically two meanings of liminality. First, we have the old conception of rituals, meaning like tribal rituals and so on, where liminality is the border between, for example, being adult and being a kid. You need to pass some rite of passage to be adult, and while are you going through that rite of passage, you are in a liminal state. Secondary, in game design theory and so on, liminality is treated quite differently. Now, a picture is that, in his opinion, and in opinion of many others after him, the game, in this case role-playing, creates some sort of magical circle. And that magical circle is something that is not really influenced by the outside world. This works also in sports. For example, while boxing, it's completely okay to punch the other guy senseless, and everybody thinks, okay, they are in some sort of not really ordinary situation, and we respect that. If you punch people randomly in the street, nobody is going to come around and say, yeah, maybe, you know, it was part of some sport. No. The magical circle needs to be clearly set, and then, in your mind and also in the thinking of society and so on, it kind of creates a border between what happens here and what happens elsewhere. Meaning that for the student, everything is quite more simple, because while he is in the circle, and he is really in the circle, he thinks about mostly about the game. How will I get to the airport? How can I solve this situation? What words should I use? He's not thinking about, I need to pay my bills for my electricity at home. He's probably not thinking about, I'm having some issues with my wife or something. And also, what is important for us as teachers, he shouldn't be thinking about consequences. If I say this, will I get evaluated by my teacher? No, he's thinking only about what happens in the circle. Also, there are some more complex things like time constraints, and even if they are not part of the game, we as humans still perceive them. We still know, okay, so the lesson is ending in 20 minutes. So that's there are just limits to the magical circle thing. Now, what happens with the student? First, he enters the game. And at this time, he has his skills and also has his fears and all the other baggage he brings in. But in the circle, what happens even with the very simple kinds of role-playing, like let's get to the airport or ask someone for a direction, he meets some sort of narrative. There is some story to it. He can also meet some kind of immersion, which means, okay, I'm not myself right now, I'm in some sort of fictional situation. And he should meet some sort of challenge. There should be something that he needs to overcome. I need to get the information. I need to ask the right questions. I need to convince someone. And what is really perfect for education, he needs to find some sort of catharsis. The scene ends with something. You will get to the airport. You have convinced the doctor to give you the medicine. Something like that. Very simple. And outside of the circle, they reflect on the experience, which creates meaning. Important distinction between reflecting on experience and evaluation of experience. We will get to that. This creation of meaning is one of the most important parts of the learning process. And this everything, if we should sum it in one sentence, means that the role-playing, in this case, acts as a safe space. It acts as a sort of environment that you can experiment in, and you can try to break some rules. You can try to do something new. And that is very good for the student and also for the teacher. How to get the most out of role-playing? Here are 5 simple rules that I have derived after some 14 years of doing role-playing exercises, and we will go through them quickly. First, simple and clear briefing. The students needs to know all the basic stuff about who are you, why are we doing this, when is this going to end, and also what are the objectives. For example, this is really a really complex role-playing situation. Could be something like you need to convince the investor that he wants to give you the money while your startup has some legal problems. It's really complex, but still, the student should know, okay, so this is happening. Second thing, there should be really clear borders between role-playing and the lesson, both in time and space. Because if you don't create that safe space, if that magical circle doesn't work, your role-playing is probably not going to kick off. So, there are some simple tricks. For example, change space. The negotiation table for this startup experiment is that table. And while this lesson is normally taken at this table, while we are playing, we stay there. Simple. 3. Students have just enough information about the scenario, which means that you don't overload them with unnecessary things, and at the same time, you kind of set the borders for what is going to happen. Very simple way to do this is handing out prepared sheets with the necessary information, which also reinforces the feeling of, oh, this is serious stuff in the students. 4, yay for conflicts, nay for competitiveness. It is completely okay, and it is even necessary to have some sort of conflict in the role-playing scenario. The conflict can be very simple, like, I don't know how to get to the airport, and the other guy maybe knows that, but he isn't really good at giving directions. That is simple conflict. It can be more complex conflict, like, I need to sell my startup, and that guy doesn't want to give me his money for nothing. That is really complex conflict. And it is okay if those conflicts between the students or between the role players end in some way. It's completely okay to fail in getting the medicine from the doctor. It's completely okay to fail in getting the directions. It's really not okay to be evaluated for it. It's really not okay to be judged for it. And 5, reflection, not evaluation. The reflection should follow these basic guidelines. You need to sum up what happened, because after role-playing, especially if it concerns more than one student, they need to get a clear view on the situation. What really happened? Establish some sort of timetable. Okay, so he came in, had some demands, I told him this, he told me that, scene ended. Cool. What were the weak points? What you perceived was kinda bad for you, where your language was failing or something, and it's completely okay to ask what was the most difficult thing to you, the student, and let him evaluate it. And then maybe elaborate on it and say, yeah, I also, thought that this wasn't going so great, so we are going to work on that in the next lesson. The strong points also, because every time you mention some weak points in role-playing and in education whatsoever, you should also mention some strong points to give the student some sort of accomplishment. And what is really different from most of the educational approaches, feelings. Because how you felt in that scenario can be a very quick question, which will usually lead to something like, not really important for me. And that's okay, then just pass it on. But in some scenarios, and in some cases, even a very simple thing like you're asking doctor for medicine or something can create some sort of strong emotion because it may be connected to something that the student was going through, something that he's thinking about. And in that case, you have something to work on. Now, how to avoid failure in role-playing? 7 simple points. First, be civil. If you are going to introduce role-playing with, okay, everybody calm down, we are going to do something very dangerous this lesson, or in some sort of kind of Shakespearean kind of play, like, here ya, now, the role-playing is about to begin, then you are going to fail completely, and it's going to be embarrassing, and you don't want to get there. Second, prepare scenarios that are relatable to the client, which means that, I think that was part of the previous lesson also, that doesn't also mean that it must be something that he knows from his work. Also, it can mean that relates somehow to his personal life. But there is a very important red line there, because you don't want to hurt the client. Then you should know the client well, because it's very easy to hit some really sore point, some sort of trauma in his personal life, and you're not there to traumatize the client. Third, start with short and simple and progress gradually during the year or during the semester or something. When you start with scenarios like, okay, so you are detective and this guy is the suspect and this happens, you are going to lose them very quickly. If you convince them with starting with very simple things like all those getting directions, the shop interaction, and so on, then maybe you have a chance. Fourth, change the space. A different place for role-playing than for teaching. The props are kinda problematic, because too much props can kill you, sometimes actually, and the scene change is much more effective, and usually the props are directly in conflict with the first point, be civil. If you bring in some sort of medieval costumes or something, then your client is probably going to be like, yeah, cool story, bro, but 5. The only evaluation resulting from the role-playing should be client's own evaluation. That doesn't mean that you are not allowed to speak to him about it. And you should help the client with getting his evaluation. You should help him with putting it into words, maybe putting it into some sort of summary or something, but always keep in mind that don't judge him too harshly, because if you break the magic of the circle, he's not going to do that again. 6. Role-playing should be used as a very rare spice. Something like 5 to 10% of the actual education process at most, which is probably like 5 to 10% more than you use it now. But if you use too much role-playing, then the structure is going to collapse, and also some people just really don't like role-playing. That doesn't mean that you should avoid it at all costs, because it has its uses, but putting too much of the role-playing is just degradatory to the educational process. And 7, bad role-playing is much worse than no role-playing at all, which means that if you just barge into the classroom and think, okay, I am not really prepared, but we can do something with this, let's try some role-playing, and I will assign some simple roles and something will happen, then not only you are, kind of bad teacher, but also you are undermining your possibilities in using role-playing. You need to have the scenario tested in some way. You need to think about it, and you need to prepare very short things for you, like, okay, I need a timetable. Okay, what can happen in this scenario? How can I prepare for it? What is the possible outcome? Why I am doing this for this specific student? If you don't know these, don't go into role-playing. It's probably going to crash and burn, and bad experience while gaming is much worse than bad experience in the usual education process. We are all used to bad formal teaching from the school. It's something that we all know very well. We are not really used to bad games. And that is all. I have one final question. What is the thing that connects the first 4 cases of role-playing, even the erotical one? Yeah, the most important thing is the safe space, because it's completely okay to pretend that you are wizards and fighters if everybody is in the same frame. It's completely okay to pretend that your lover is a cop going to cuff you or something if we are in the same game. Because if one of you isn't playing, you have a problem right there.